So, Brien, thank you very much for joining Ancient Origins for this interview about the elongated skulls in Paracas. Some of our viewers will have already seen an interview we had some time ago about various research around elongated skulls. But I'm really enthusiastic about this interview because it relates to a recent announcement you made about some genetic testing that has been done on one of the skulls found in Paracas. So to begin with, could you please just give a little bit of background about the Paracas skulls in particular and what makes them different from other elongated skulls that have been found?
Well, what's kind of intriguing is if you look on the internet to any photo, website, and if you put in something like alien skull or human hybrid skull, quite often the Paracas skulls show up predominantly because they are so large in size. Some of them are very natural looking, and also there are so many of them that have been found, which is quite intriguing.
So would you say that some of the features that these skulls have rule out the possibility of cranial deformation, processes like head flattening or head binding, which are known to have happened in other cases of elongated skulls?
Well, that is the curious point, in that cranial deformation is known to have occurred in many different parts of the world, most prominently about 2,000 years ago, from the Middle East, even Melanesia, Central America. But because I've been intimately engaged with the elongated skulls of Paracas and the Paracas culture in general that died out 2,000 years ago, I've had the opportunity to look in person at numerous of the skulls, as well as hundreds which are in collections all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them, I would say, possibly between 5 and 10% of them do not show obvious signs of cradle boarding or other forms of cranial deformation, which generally tends to create flat surfaces, either in the forehead or the back of the head. Some of these literally look like they are natural in appearance.
And so I've also heard that some of the other features include increased volume and increased weight compared to other skulls. Is that not something that could also happen as a result of head flattening, where, through the process of binding, the size actually increases, or is that absolutely not possible?
Well, from the doctors that I've spoken to, they said that you can alter the shape of the skull, but you can't increase the size of the skull, because the skull is genetically predetermined to have a certain volume, and so it's much like in terms of the analogy I have is pottery, where you have a piece of greenware, which is a pot which is not quite dried yet. You can alter its shape, but you can't change the volume of it itself. Some people have stated that the reason why the Paracas could have had denser skulls or be heavier, etc., is the result of their diet or malnutrition or whatever. And the thing is that they had an incredible diet of seafood as well as terrestrial plants. They probably actually ate better than most of us do today.
Mm-hmm. And so the study of these skulls is becoming a lot more interesting now that we have the technology for extracting DNA and analyzing DNA. Before any testing was undertaken, did you have any theories yourself about what might be found?
Well, I didn't want to conjecture anything. Of course, I've had many different ideas, but I've been waiting for actual DNA analysis, and that has taken an incredibly long time, mainly due to lack of funding and also finding a geneticist who, A, is open to studying this, doing it at a fraction of the normal cost that it would cost commercially. And importantly, we wanted to do this independently, because going through any governmental or private foundation or whatever would probably result in the results either being deleted or altered or being kept for purposes other than my intent. And my intent simply is to find the truth as to who these people were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so can you explain a bit about the testing process that actually took place or has taken place so far?
Well, it's a very complex process, and most people don't realize this because they think, well, DNA testing is quite simple now. I can go and have my, a blood sample extracted and be told within a few days, you know, all of my genetic ancestry. But what you have to take into account is the last of the Paracas died 2,000 years ago. And so you're talking about 2,000 years of the degeneration of the material. The late Lloyd Pye, who I was acquainted with, very personally and professionally because of his fascination with this, his analogy is that to take a sample and analyze it from somebody who's living is the equivalent of looking at or studying a crystal bowl, because it's complicated and intact. And then he said the equivalent of ancient DNA is taking that crystal bowl and throwing it on a concrete floor, because it becomes shattered into tiny little segments. So it's only the most recent, sophisticated, extremely expensive DNA analyzing equipment that can take all of those tiny segments and put them back together. So it's been very difficult to find someone who would pursue that. We actually have two different geneticists at work, but it happened to be this one who's had samples for more than 2 years who has given me this initial result, which completely shocked him.
And so the thing most people really want to know is what exactly was found in that initial result.
Yeah, and basically what I can say is that he speculates that there are segments of the DNA of the Paracas which do not match anything in GenBank, which is the genetic database located in the United States that contains all known genetic DNA information. So he said there are segments which don't seem to be any haplotype of human that we know of. Also not related to Neanderthal or any other human-like being that has been studied so far.
Quite incredible, really. But now you have emphasized that this is phase 1 or stage 1 of the testing. What then is the next stage after this one? Is it possible that this result is contaminated, or it's not accurate, and that further stages may reveal something different?
It is possible. However, this person who lives in the United States and has a doctorate, he does a lot of contract work with the U.S. government, so clearly the government wouldn't choose someone who was flaky or a sensationalist. He's taken a lot of time. It's been more than 2 years for him to give us the initial result of one sample so far, but he does have samples from 3 different skulls from Paracas, and so what I'm hoping is that this, and the reason why I released it, this information, is to try to generate interest from the public so that we can do a fundraiser in order to be able to study the other 2 skulls, as well as other samples from the 3 skulls themselves, so that we can replicate the tests as many times as possible to see whether or not this is an anomaly or whether it's something which is truly mind-blowing, I guess is the term.
Yeah, exactly. And is it possible, the fact that it doesn't match anything in the gene bank, could it be that this is just a one-of-a-kind mutation, a mutation that hasn't been seen before and is just unique to that particular race of people?
It could be, but again, the whole study is so new that, and the Paracas are very mysterious people. Nobody has really studied them for about 70 years. The people who study them now study their textiles, but the whole idea of the fact that their skulls seem to be of a different shape has been dismissed in general as simply being cranial deformation, but in fact nobody knows where the Paracas people came from. They lived on the coast of Peru, and through my studies I believe that there's a certain percentage of their ancestry that comes from another part of the world, because they also, amongst the royalty, seem to have had reddish brown hair, which is not a Native American characteristic, and they were reasonably tall. Some specimens we found were 5'10" to 6 feet to even taller in height, and that's quite atypical of a Native American person 2,000 plus years ago living on the coast of Peru.
Mm-hmm. And so what is your opinion about these findings? Do you have a view about what this actually means, this result?
Well, the theory I'm developing is that the Paracas are a mix of different types of people. The area they chose to live 2,000 years ago was much lusher than it is now. It would have been a perfect place for a society to live in terms of food production. The fact that they had totora reeds and still have totora growing on the coast of Peru meant that they were capable of building not only little boats but probably large ships out of reeds. They had cotton to make sails, and they could have been great seafarers. I also believe that the famous Nazca people, who also occupied the area after the demise of the Paracas, could literally have wiped the Paracas culture out and absorbed their knowledge, absorbed some of their some of their people would have interbred with the Nazca, but elongated skulls disappear in the Paracas area 2,000 years ago, and that corresponds with the arrival of the Nazca, who were a very warlike people.
And so you say a different sort of mix of people. Now, the thing on everyone's mind is, are these skulls alien? Are they extraterrestrial? When you say a different mix of people, do you think there's a possibility that a race of beings did arrive in this part of the country and perhaps bred with humans? What's your view on that?
Well, I'm open to the idea. The thing is, I don't want to go too far in that direction yet because, again, we've only had an initial result. But due to the fact that the geneticist has found segments of DNA which don't correspond to anything, I think it's doubtful that they're a separate breed or type of humanity, because where would they have come from? Mm-hmm. And again, the strange thing is this predominant aspect of these elongated skulls amongst the royal family is very, very odd. So future sampling, future results will either reinforce or dismiss the result we have. But I think we're looking at something very intriguing, and I don't dismiss the idea of there having been off-planet either intervention or something. And Lloyd Pye was very strong with that idea. He simply said, these are not human beings.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Lloyd Pye, are you doing anything to sort of carry forward the research he was doing, or do you know what is being done about the research that was being undertaken by Lloyd Pye?
Yeah, several months before his death, he passed the Star Child skull and the information on to a group of people because he knew he was ill. He wasn't sure if he would recover, and so they're doing major fundraising. They've done a lot of genetic analysis, which people can see on Lloyd's website. The thing is, people really have to spend the time to read all of the information, because you can't get a full picture of what the Star Child is or was, through 5 or 10 minutes of reading. There's been a lot of money and effort spent on Star Child, and the unfortunate thing is there's only one Star Child, whereas there are hundreds of Paracas skulls. I mean, it's it's amazing, and the access is quite astonishing too, because being related with the Paracas History Museum, I've assisted in building up the collection to 40 skulls so far, and we are very open to researchers from around the world coming, whether they're doctors or geneticists or whoever, because we honestly want to get down or get to the bottom of this, and any outside help is very greatly appreciated.
Well, I guess the quantity really opens up the possibility to replicate these results and keep everyone happy by doing those extra studies, having different researchers using different skulls, because then whatever the result will be a lot more convincing after all that replication has been done.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And any scientific test means that you have to be able to replicate it. And that's why, again, this is an initial, you could even call it teaser result that that I sent out to the public. Also, a number of individuals assisted me in raising $7,000 to do some of the testing, and I wanted them to know after 2 years that we actually did have something, that the money wasn't absconded or or blown on anything. It 100% went into it. We also have another geneticist working on completely other samples as well. That's Dr. Melba Ketchum from Texas, who, of course, is embroiled heavily in Bigfoot studies, which is she's got a lot of flack from. But I still believe in her, and there may be another one or two genetic study organizations that may come on board with this. And so the more that do the analysis and the more cross-referencing we can do, the better for this whole project.
Yeah, great. Now, there are a lot of people out there who are skeptical. They do sort of question, or they want to see these results firsthand on paper. They want to know, the name of the geneticist, the name of the institution, and they do become suspicious when some of these details aren't yet available. How would you address those concerns?
Well, I have actually spoken with the geneticist about it, and he has said that he will be willing to address the public about this, but not after one test, because it's too easy for skeptics or whoever to rip his information apart. And so as a scientist, he wants to make sure that he's done several replications, and then when he's comfortable, then he will come forward himself and discuss what it is that he believes we're looking at.
Okay, that's great. That's very positive. So moving forward from here, what's the time scale relating to further testing and also the fundraising process? I mean, if somebody did want to get involved in this, what could they do?
Well, at the moment, I've been in discussions with someone who wants to set up an Indiegogo campaign about this, and I've been discussing with him for about 5 months, but the timing hasn't been right because we've been preoccupied with other things. So probably within the next 2 or 3 months, we will set up a campaign very specifically targeted to very specific things. We'll have a complete list of where any funds will go, completely itemized. I will get nothing from it, just as I've received nothing financially from the previous fundraising that we did. And other samples have recently gone to the geneticist from a third party, and I'm still waiting for some kind of result from Dr. Melba Ketchum. She's trying to actually get at least one, if not more, laboratories in the U.S. to do complete genome studies, which is very complicated and technically would cost an absolute fortune, upwards of at least $100,000. So we're hoping that other geneticists will be able to volunteer their time and the use of their equipment for the good of, basically we're doing this for the good of humanity, not for any kind of personal benefit.
Yeah, I mean, the knowledge is incredibly important, regardless of what these skulls end up being, human or otherwise. It's still incredibly important for unraveling the history of our past. These are obviously an incredibly mysterious group of people.
Well, definitely. And the thing is, since elongated skulls have also been found amongst the Olmec of Mexico, also in, not necessarily, people have said Russia. It's not really Russia. It's actually the area of Georgia and that area. There's quite a number of elongated skulls have been found there that date back about 2,000 years. And actually, I've been mapping where this process has existed all over the world. And so what I'm trying to do is try to set up some kind of concept of migration pattern, or in fact, were these different groups genetically related? We don't know yet. It's an ongoing procedure. But I'm very thankful that you wanted to cover this story at this time, because we're at the beginning. And any time that I get more information, I'm more than willing to share it with you.
Well, thanks very much, Brien. We really appreciate you, informing us of everything going on, and we really look forward to the updates that you provide as things progress.
Well, thank you, and your organization, Ancient Origins, is a phenomenal success. I'm very much a fan. Many other people are. You're growing very rapidly, and it's wonderful that such a group as yourselves are presenting this information to a global audience, because in the past it's always been little, small groups of people trying to do what you're attempting, and you're doing an incredibly good job at it.
Oh, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.